You are live whenever you're ready.
Okay. Thank you and welcome all to the 16 May 2022 meeting of the Annapolis Transportation Board. As we have been our secretary is not with us yet, Tara Ashmore. Well, let's hope she joins us, or if not, she will catch up with this recording. The nice thing about recorded sessions is that a secretary can actually still do the job without being physically present. But I hope she'll check in within a few minutes. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. The agenda and the minutes were distributed somewhat late today, and I hope you've had a chance to look at them. I will take a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting as distributed.
So moved.
Okay, second.
Seconded.
Thank you. And all in favor? I see unanimity. Thank you. So we will proceed with the agenda. The next item is approval of the meeting minutes from the prior meeting. Hi, Tara. We have started without you, but you will have no difficulty in catching up. I do apologize for sending them out late. Tara did her job, but I was off in Baltimore ferrying my wife to medical appointments, and so did not get them until late this afternoon. If you have had a chance to look at them and are comfortable, I would like to take a motion to approve those minutes. If you're not comfortable, we can postpone it to next time. But the floor is open for a motion.
I would say we postpone it till next time.
All right. Welcome, Rhonda. That's fine with me. I won't even bother to take a vote on it. We will do that next time around. But you do have them, and they look fine to me. I don't think there will be any problems. The next item on the agenda is public participation. I'm not aware of any. And so we move to the contribution by the Transportation Department, Dr. Dua, who is not with us, so we will postpone his section until later, hoping that he will appear. Next item on the agenda is reports from committee members on electric vehicles. Tom Elvia is not with us tonight. Can you tell us of any activity on that front?
I'm not aware of any. I don't know. Is there anything open on that topic? I feel like we submitted some language and like we made our recommendation to the city.
Could you remind me what happened? Have we submitted something on paper to the city?
We voted on language to send to the city, and it passed our board. I don't know what happens after that, to be honest with you.
Okay, I guess that's on me. I've got to see that it's formally transmitted. And I apologize for not picking that up.
Yeah, no worries. But I mean, it was just we basically, are recommending language and, and the city obviously will do as they wish. But I think we can close that item out.
Okay, wonderful. Fare free transit. There has been interesting progress on this. Beth, you and I are the only ones present for fare free transit. So let's summarize what has happened. You may go first.
Okay. First, I met with Ashley Leonard, our lawyer, city lawyer, and she happens to be the contractual lawyer who deals with contracts. And the reason she is also our representative to the board. So I met with her to discuss with her the state shuttle and how fare free could affect the shuttle and what would happen with the money, almost $300,000 a year that the state pays us if we go fare free. So our discussion was kind of high level, but was a very good discussion. And she basically saw no problem, not with the current arrangement, but she did not think that the state would have any problem with making a new arrangement with us that allowed us to go fare free, but the state would still pay us the $289,000 a year that it pays us for that shuttle from the stadium. It would either be a contract or it could be a grant. Both have good points and bad points. But that's the main thing, that she didn't feel there'd be much of a problem. However, she also did feel that if we went fare free and the state still paid, that the state would not probably allow non-state people to ride that shuttle as they do now, but the non-state people have to pay. But if it's fare free, of course, they're not going to pay. So she felt that that could be a sticking point. My feeling is that, since I'm pretty sure that we are running in conjunction with the garage being down, Hillman Garage, we're running shuttles to the stadium and back again. So that wouldn't necessarily be a hindrance at all. So we haven't done anything else on that. I only just met with her, and Kurt and John and I haven't had a chance to talk or confer or discuss how to move forward. Now, I also met with Rhonda Pindle Charles, who is somewhere here, and
Yes, she's in attendance.
Yes, and she's going to give a summary of our meeting. And the only reason, the thing about that is her summary, I've checked it over, she sent it to me, and it's very good. And I just thought you might like to hear from someone else other than me. And so she's going to give that one. But before I go there, Carol has a question. You're muted, Carol. Okay.
I do have a question. Despite my vast experience as a bus rider, I want to hear more about the people who ride, and from where and to where are they riding the shuttle, the state shuttle, who are presumably not state employees.
Well, that I can't tell you. I mean, since the state shuttle just goes from the stadium to downtown, they must just ride down to the city. It doesn't take them anywhere else. The shuttle.
Is that something that the state is aware of as a?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they collect money from those people.
And don't we wonder?
The bus driver collects. Pardon?
Don't we wonder who those people are? And isn't it relevant to the Annapolis transit system that there is a component, a chunk of people riding that bus who could be serviced in a more systematic way by the transit system?
Well, if we're running shuttles because of to the stadium and back again, because of the garage being down, we are shuttling those people.
Well, I understand that in terms of the present situation, but has this been a historic pattern that people?
It's been running for years.
I know the shuttle's been running for years, but have people, have a lot of people who are not state employees been riding it for years?
To the best of our knowledge, we don't know the absolute ins and outs, and we don't know the number. It could be a very low number. I mean, I'm not sure that there's
has some sense about the.
Well, yes, but we have not been given that, Carol, and
in fact, I believe in our report is a summary of rider statistics on each of the lines, including that one.
Yes, but not non-state workers, though.
No.
That's
well, no,
the thing.
It's just a count of people who ride on the bus. I believe we have those numbers, but
yes, but
it's somewhat tangential to this discussion.
Yes, it is. And then these are things that you talk about as you move into things. We're just trying to figure out right now how we can save that money that the state pays us to run that shuttle. That's what we're where we are now. Then we can go into other issues that are side issues to that state shuttle. But right now it's, can we save that money? Because that's very important on whether we can or not. And right now the concept is yes, we can change it, and that the state would be open to it, that it should not be a problem.
To make it very clear, what we're trying to do is to cast our recommendations in a form that all existing service would be preserved, and that the only change would be that fares from individuals would not be collected. We hope to preserve all of the revenue streams that presently exist, and we think there's a pretty good chance of doing so. It may require some minor modifications of grants and contracts, but we see no major impediment. Is that a good summary, Beth?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So I want to note, Beth, you mentioned this glitch on non-state folks riding the state shuttle versus our own shuttle. I would just hope that in the discussions, everyone realizes that should be neutrality, right? If it's fare free, whether the state is providing a shuttle or we're providing a shuttle, anybody should get on any locomotive that's there, and
Yes,
it's
that's
going
our
to take them
intent.
downtown.
Yes, that's what we feel, but the state may not, since they're contracting and paying the money for that shuttle for their people. They may not let non-state people on that shuttle.
And conversely, state people then can't get on ours. I mean, so if you make that point, I hope a neutrality would be achieved. Anybody can get on any vehicle that would show up.
Yeah, we would suggest that be worked on. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. I can add to this summary if you're through, Beth. Rhonda, did you want to say a few words about your meeting?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Yes, Beth and I had a very nice meeting, almost an hour and a half last Tuesday, and we went through several different things. First of all, we talked about the revenue being only 7% that's collected. We did talk about the $300,000. I had suggested if we go fare free, is there a possibility that we can accept donations on the bus? I know oftentimes as tourists, when you go to different cities or towns, they do have a little can or whatever there if you want to give donations towards the transit. Also suggested, if this isn't already done, if businesses can adopt a bus shelter. I'm not sure if that's being done. Also, if businesses would like to adopt riders, say for instance, there's a pass that's $200. Would a business donate on behalf of a bus rider, or would a group of businesses or business districts pull together to adopt riders to help people possibly with the cost, even though we're not going to necessarily accept, but they may want to accept donations on behalf of riders just to help with the transit system. That's just throwing that out there. And our city's planning and zoning department to work with the city's businesses. We have Mr. Stephen Rice, who's our economic development manager, and our small and minority business enterprise liaison, Ms. Hope Stewart. This fare free transit initiative could be rolled out as a pilot program. The best way to roll it out, whether pilot or not, is for it to roll out citywide, since there are too many variables to consider, especially when it comes to routes. And Beth indicated that one jurisdiction did roll out theirs non-citywide, and it was a disaster. There's, I believe, a county coordinator for the county's transit program. Routes would be expanded under fare free transit. It would be prudent to have a name, a tagline for fare free transit. And there was a lady years ago in our community who was a fare free transit rider, and I won't get into the nature of it, but it's kind of a funny story. But
I think it's cute. I think it's a funny story.
This lady lived in Parole, and she would get on the bus, And she would complain about the driver, the bus itself, what they didn't have. And she would ride all the way to Lafayette Avenue on West Street, and she never paid. Now, I guess it was a distraction, or she couldn't afford it. I don't know what. But everybody knew when she got on what the deal was, and the bus driver knew, and he just kind of laughed it off. So it was kind of funny. So she was very well known in our community, but I won't call any names. Moving on. Of course, ADOT's input is very critical. Is there $300,000 either available from the state? Will we keep that, or something even from the Naval Academy? Beth had mentioned about exploring Oregon, Montana, what they've done, and possibly invite the Oregon expert as a guest to one of the Transportation Board Committee meetings, and even possibly the person from Montana. The city is facing a structural deficit in fiscal year 25. So now would be the time to explore fare free transit, since we do have time enough to work out the kinks or decide not to pursue it at all. The city is now working on our fiscal year 23 budget. So now probably would be a good time to start, possibly July the 1st. Data gathering, of course, is very important. And I asked Beth, from what I understand, the drivers are still using a clicker to count the passengers. Contact the city's Office of Emergency Management concerning Food Fridays regarding the possible increase in ridership with fare-free transit. And of course, our Ward 2 Alderwoman, Karma O'Neill, is the coordinator of that Food Fridays initiative. Contact the Naval Academy regarding the possible increase in ridership with midshipmen. Also, no new staff would be needed, nor rolling stock new buses would be needed for fare-free, is my understanding. Bus routes are named by colors. I didn't know this, since colors are universal, unlike numbers and words. So that's just kind of a snapshot of what Beth and I talked about at our meeting last week.
Thank you so much. I'm particularly interested in your ideas for covering revenue shortfalls. Actually, all of those items that you mentioned are very much in sync with our own recommendations. We had a list of things, and you put an interesting spin on some of them. For example, sponsorship of a certain number of riders. It could be cast in many different ways. I'm so happy that you are creatively coming up with new ways of casting it. This would have to be, there are many details to be worked out, but I'm confident they can be. What I'd like to do now is to summarize a meeting that we had with the mayor, because I think it was exceptionally good. We convened a meeting with the mayor in his office. The participants included Lisa Rodvian, who is our representative on the county council and chairman of that council now. We had Samuel Jordan, who is the head of the Transportation Crisis Committee of the Caucus of African American Leaders. We had 3 members from the Transportation Board, myself, Beth, and John Purnell. And we had Alex Pline participating. He is a past chairman of the Transportation Board and is very much a supporter and advocate for converting to a fare-free model. Each of us made presentations. The remarkably effective presentations were Lisa Rodvian's. She arrived with a passion and a commitment and with knowledge of what the county is doing that I think swayed Gavin mightily. The county is now committed, not only in words, but with dollars in the budget to support a continuation of fare-free transit, which was initiated on a temporary basis during COVID. That will be continued into the indefinite future. She made a number of arguments, mostly based on equity and the need to provide the same kinds of subsidies for low-income people who depend on transit as we already provide to high-income people who drive cars. The other thing that she stressed was the importance to make our 2 systems look alike, that they be seamless in their operation, so that passengers who must travel on both systems don't see a different set of rules and a different set of fare collection policies on either one, because there are passengers who use both and transfer from one line to another. And I guess that's about it. I think the mayor was impressed with the quality of the work that had gone into this, the analysis, and with the passion that some members of the people around the table brought to the discussion. That's all I had to say on that. Anything else, Beth, that you'd like to cover before we move on?
No, I don't think so. I think just that the mayor was really in a little surprise. I was a little surprised just how much he got behind and really thought of this effort. And we've been informed by our alderman alderwoman that he really intends to push it. Now, we still have work to do, and I'm sure that we have to
Yeah, there are
keep kind
details
of,
to be looked into,
banging the
like
drum,
contracts
we
and
got to
so
keep
forth.
banging. Pardon?
But we will confer with our attorney, and the city has some minor adjustments to make, but I do consider them truly minor and something that we can get through
Yes.
without too
And
much trouble.
And as Rhonda said, we in fact, the mayor suggested July 1st also, and we're hoping we can figure all that out. That's not as far away as I'd like it to be under the circumstances, but if we keep rolling ahead, we can hopefully be able to do that.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the next item on the agenda then. Close this so I can read what I'm doing, which is legislation, off-street parking requirements. I think even after our presentation from the head of the Eastport Civic Association last week, there's no additional action on that. Karma, is it true that that item is basically postponed indefinitely? The parking, it's 0922 off-street parking requirements for restaurants.
It is not postponed indefinitely. It is postponed as they complete the study to talk about outside dining and the use of restaurants being able to do parklets. A parklet being 2 parking spaces in front of or adjacent to their business. It was decided at the two council meetings ago. I can't remember the date of that. That it's 6 months. So it was 6 months from that date. So we're looking at an October completion for the study to be done. And the study really was deciding how we were going to move forward. There's enough positive and enough people coming out in support of restaurants being able to do parklets and whatnot, that the council decided that it made sense to get that study done so that we can find out, what the fees are going to be, what the impact is, all of those things. And then in conjunction with that, it kind of doesn't have anything to do with it, but it does, the 0922, because the 0922 is just removing the requirement of restaurants to have a certain percentage of parking spaces per number of seats in their restaurants. And really that legislation is built around the fact that it's actually not fair in so much that if you're a new restaurant, you're required to have this, but if you're an old restaurant, you're not. So it's not fair commerce. There are enough restaurants that fall under the stipulation that says that they don't have to have a certain percentage of parking. So we've talked about reducing that from 30% to 15%, or in some cases, allowing them to utilize the parking in different ways. So they're kind of going in conjunction with each other. They're kind of completely opposite. And I know that doesn't make much sense, but they are. And I can't say that it's indefinitely put on the table because, again, there's enough differences in them that there are people that want to push one forward in the hopes that we have sort of more free enterprise, basically restaurants that can open, restaurants and businesses per se, that can open without having to designate 30% parking adjacent to their space.
Do you have a rough idea of how long this study is likely to take?
Well, the council gave it 6 months, so the
Okay.
study should be completed in October.
Okay. So if we have any words of advice that we would like to add to the mix, we have some time to do so.
Yes, and there is a committee that is in charge of studying it, and I know that it's made up of planning and zoning and some Eastport Business Association members, as well as downtown Ward 1 Association members.
Wonderful, thank you. Next item under new business is bicycle rack locations. We had a request from the city to make our recommendations for locations of bicycle racks that will be installed, I guess, from now on. And I asked Tara, you had a question?
And you immediately said that they should be aligned with the bus stops so that somebody could get a bus from one area to a bus stop to get on fare free transit.
You say I did? No.
Well, you know, did that,
Yeah,
did I-
I mean, that's a super idea. I guess what I would like to ask for, Vince Harriman indicated that he would be happy to take the lead on this, and I've suggested that he assemble everybody who was interested in providing input to this location thing. Tara, it sounds as though you may be interested.
It sounds like I just threw my name in that one.
Yes.
Yes.
And if anybody else would like to participate, I suggest you talk to Vince Harriman directly, and we will come up with a list of suggested bike locations. Great. I just want them to be modern bike racks. You know, the old style where you had 10 in a row and you can't use 8 of them? There are modern ones, and I hope the city selects those. I'm sure they will. New initiatives. Oh, I wanted to suggest for the consideration of the board that we think about new initiatives that we might want to turn our attention to. We had a couple of small ones during the past year, a big one on fare-free transit. And each of you have made suggestions, and I'd like to just ask you whether what those might be, so that we can make a marker for them and then move on as interests dictate. One item that keeps coming up over and over again is transit regionalization, that is making the transit department, coalescing it with, say, the county or even larger regional transit departments. This is something that has been considered from time to time, and it may be time to come around to that again. In our conversations with Lisa Rodvian, it seems that, and with our own director of transit operations, it seems that there is a positive feeling toward somehow getting those two systems together and perhaps coalescing with larger regional systems too. So that's something that we could turn our attention to. A combined regional transit system is something that Kwaku, I think, is personally not opposed to, sees advantages. There are overhead and management costs which might be saved by combined operations. To the extent that the transit systems look very much alike on fares, that could be a plus. And frankly, the county has resources that are very much larger than those that we have in the city. So it could work to the city's advantage to regionalize this and get together with the county. But I realize there are also cons. And so it would be up to us to go through the full list of pros and cons and come to an opinion about whether we would recommend converting from our present city system to a regional system. So I just wanted to raise that as a possibility. Who among us thinks that they would be interested in working on regionalizing our transit systems? Anybody?
Mr. Chair, I think Dr. Duval has a question. He's raised
Oh,
his
he's
hand.
here.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Oh, there you are. Thank you. In fact,
I do
you have a
apologize
place on
for
the
being
agenda.
late. I have some Wi-Fi connection problems, so I couldn't. But first of all, I don't have any updates on the department, but I would like to add to what you said about what the county is doing and move towards a regionalization. As I have said before, the county currently is undertaking a feasibility study to look into integrating the Annapolis Transit and the county transit, which we are in support of that. We have been working on it. We have been providing data as they move along. So we are looking forward to that. At least a countrywide transit system, I think it will be very, very beneficial to the residents of the city and the rest of the county. That's what I have.
That's good. Could you give us some idea of when did this start and how long is it likely to proceed? And do you think there's going to be a favorable recommendation by the county?
Is a question towards me?
Yes.
I don't remember the date, but it's ongoing. In terms of the finished date, I have to check where the consultant is, but we have been working with them. I can reach out to Mr. Sneed in terms of the expected date. Alternatively, I can look at I think the RFP or the proposal that was submitted by the selected consultant. It has a timeline and some major milestones, so I can get that information and pass it on to you to share with the board.
Wonderful. I wanted also to thank you for the data that you were able to get from SP Plus on the use of parking permits. They're helpful, although, as you will recall, I had some questions about definitions, which we still haven't heard from SP Plus on. And thank you also for the list for the number of city employees. I think it's 157 or so city employees that are granted free parking privileges. And that's a good number to know. How do you evaluate the value of that? Is it $10 a day, basically?
I don't know. I did not look into the details of it, but I will assume that if you use the monthly rate, you have to come out with something. So assuming that the city employees are paying for parking and they have monthly, they have to pay for the whole month. So for those people, you get the how much they pay and multiply it by the number of the vehicles. I believe that is how it is derived. In terms of monthly packets, I'm not aware of any discounts. So you can use the monthly parking fee multiplied by the number of the city employees, plus also some of the city vehicles that are parked there, and also some the council members. All of them also have parking passes, and that will give you an idea of how much it will be.
Okay, great, thank you. Our preliminary look at the numbers. Well, first of all, there are uncertainties which we're going to clear up, and I thank you for pushing SP Plus to help us with that. But it looks like it's a minimum of $200,000 a year, or so that we are presently granting in free parking privileges. And I think it may be more than that, but we will come back. Tara, you had a question? No, not hearing you. You're muted.
The typical IRS reimbursement rate and all the government employees, from my experience moving to Annapolis, is about $170,000. So I think you're at least $340,000. And then you'd have to add on the council members, as Kwaku pointed out as well. Carol, sorry to jump in front of you.
I didn't understand that. Would you explain that? Where did that come in?
Sure. You have the number of monthly free parking, you have
Yes.
12 months, and then the IRS reimbursement rate, or the amount that the IRS will let you take tax-free, which generally pegs the price. So when you think about Dillon Bus and everybody else, everybody prices their monthly rate off that IRS max limit on tax-deferred spending accounts. So it's $170 a month times 12 times the number of participants got me to $340K, not including the council members, but we can go over it at some point. But that you are slightly low with $200,000.
Well, I think Kwaku's approach was to look at the actual pricing rather than that IRS thing.
Right, I was trying to Google it as well. We can work
Okay.
that up.
Okay, great. Carol, you had
And
your
I
hand
think
up?
that is a very good way to start. If you don't get the detailed information, at least as a minimum to estimate the value of the free parking.
Okay. Carol?
I'm wondering if the councilwomen would like to share any thoughts or opinions they have about regionalization, and if they have a sense, a broader sense of what the council's position might be at this point. Regionalization is not a new issue before the city government. It's come up before, and in fact created some reluctance in the past because it would require a sharing of power or giving up of power. So what do you think, Alderman?
Thanks for asking. That's a loaded question. I think that it deserves I don't want to use the word study because I think that we say study all the time and it gets us nowhere. I do think it deserves some research. One of the things that we always grapple with, at least I always grapple with, is that in some cases, people believe that Annapolis is this very high density area. It's not necessarily high density, and it's not high density enough to support some of the initiatives that we'd like to do. I think that looking at ways to combine it with the county, as they seem to have more buses, more staffing, and maybe Kwaku can speak to this, more opportunities for expansion, whereas we are limited to our very, what I call small income opportunities, that it's really hard to find additional income opportunities. And when we're talking about, ways to fund things like transportation, transportation is widely funded by parking. And you go back to, okay, how much in free parking are we giving? And maybe if we weren't giving as much free parking, transportation would be better funded, and then therefore we could do more things. So I definitely think that it deserves a research to look at it and compare us against some other places that are similar, where we have a small jurisdiction that's surrounded by a much larger jurisdiction and they're operating separately.
Let me add to that. Carol, if you recall, back then, I think it was the process that became an issue, because when those who were leading the idea of this regionalization went before council, council was interested in how much savings that the city can derive from that kind of partnership. And there was no clear cut. Everything was conditional Because of that, the group couldn't give some kind of a definite answer, so that council will use that one as a basis of making decision. So that was, in my view, that was the main idea, because most of the things were done by the then director, kind of in-house. So when it was going to council, then the law office has to come in, finance has to come in, HR has to come in, which they were not part. These city agencies or departments were not part of the initial process, how you deal with it. And there are also clauses within the grant agreements that you cannot just lay transit employees off or by basically joining a group for this regionalization. What I see different this time is that it is very transparent. At various milestones, both the city staff and the county staff will look at the proposals. Eventually, it will come to the transportation board to take a look at it, and also to council. So because it is this time within the county, remember, for those, for that kind of regionalization, Howard County was part of it. And basically Howard County was going to control everything. This one is within the county. And given the partnership between the city and the county, I believe that is likely to work out very well. The main thing is that so far as transit assets are concerned, the city has more transit assets in terms of building, facilities, equipment than the county, because as you know, the county still contract out most of the services. So this time around, I think it's going to be different, and it will be more transparent, and the city may be able to determine how much savings if they join forces with the county to provide a county-wide transit system.
Thank you. All right, all the hands are taken care of. Please let me know. Why don't you think about it? I won't ask for commitments now, but if you are personally interested in looking into transit regionalization, let me know, and we'll form a committee and look into it further. Alderwoman Pindell Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I definitely agree with Alderwoman O'Neill. There needs to be some research done concerning this. I guess my main concern is when research is done, at some point we need to look at the riders themselves. What are their needs? How do they see it? What are the challenges for them currently? Can we as a city fix them, or is it a county fixing issue? And I agree with Dr. Duwa, because way back when they talked about regional, it was Howard County who was kind of leading the charge, and it was an uncomfortable feeling. And with, you know, we talk about these county city mergers, or do we, don't we? And I look at, you know, we've talked about fire, police, and we have to look at, in those instances, you know, what's the response time? Are we able to control our own police and fire department? Police and fire have to go out in the county, have a much wider jurisdiction, which means with police and fire, their response times aren't the same as ours. And I'm not bashing the county at all. We have a Class 1 fire department, and we have a CALEA accredited police department. I don't think the county does. So we have to look at what we are offering to our residents, how they see, how we are providing the services to them. Can we accommodate them based on what they need? If we can't, can the county do that? Do we ask them? My mother always said, you know, we've had just different issues over the years, especially I had a neighbor who had an insurance company. It was that had no local person, agent to go to. And he was having a lot of trouble because this agent was somewhere out in the Midwest. And my mother always said, can you put your hands on them? Can you reach out and touch if you need something? And so that's kind of how I've approached these mergers or reconfigurations, are we able to communicate with whatever entity it is and be able to solve the problem as if we were doing it ourselves? And we also have to put an equity lens on it. How does that all fit into the equation? So we need to be careful. I definitely agree with Dr. Duwa that when it was the Howard County leading the charge, there was some skittishness about it. Definitely according to Alderwoman O'Neill, our chair, we do need some research, but the research should be focused on the residents. And the other thing is too, if we ever decide to do that, it should be a pilot. We should not be committed totally, since this is something totally new and different that we've never really done before. Back when I was a child, we rode the Arundel bus and it was strictly city, and it was a different situation than if we had gone regional. Of course, you had the other buses that came from Baltimore and dropped you off here and take you back, and same sort of situation. But we need to take a careful look at this. But the riders are the ones that should really drive this bus.
Thank you. Good points. But Charles Brooks has had his hands up for a while.
Okay.
So Charles, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Ah,
Okay, a couple things. The county for fire and police, they're both trained for the city of Annapolis by the county, both training classes. As far as regionalization for transit, it's been discussed before. In the previous transportation board that I was on, it was turned down mainly because of Howard County. But the question I have with this new idea of doing this again, First Transit does not operate the same as they do around the country in this area. They are terrible in this area. So one thing that I would like to be sure of, if this does come to pass, even as a pilot, that the training processes that they have are not implemented in this area, because they are terrible. I ride both systems. I do not like riding outside of Annapolis Transit, especially in the county. They've got a lot of work to do. So that's just my 2 cents.
that's worth more than 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up about the training. Yes, I'm aware of that. But we've had these discussions amongst council and even behind closed doors about that. But I'm not going to get into that. It's a different kind of entity, but it all kind of comes under the umbrella of city versus county. But thank you, Mr. Brooks.
You're welcome. I've got a brother that works as a firefighter here still, so I kind of know where you're going with that.
Yeah.
Beth?
I was just going to say that the other thing that is so important is, where does the authority and where does the representation for the city sit in this in a combined police department or transportation department or any of these things? The city wants to make sure that they're not put second, which has happened, and they need to be equal and have an equal voice and get as much out of this merger or any merger as the county does. It can't be pushed to the bottom, which more or less was what happened with the other one, and that's what Howard County was doing. And
yeah, territory and control are always issues.
territory. Yeah, it has to. They have to be equal partners, and they have to work together to be equal partners, and one can't override the other one.
Good. Dr. Dua?
Just quickly to add to that, the study, unlike the previous attempt of this regionalization, there was no study prior to the discussion of this regional transit system in those times. The current one looks at everything, including the organization of the new transit system or authority, including how much the city needs to bring to the table, including feasibility of the proposed route or restructuring, because it may require, based upon my experience, it will require a complete route design. and what type of transit services could be provided. Is it general on demand in more rural areas, in more urban centers? Is it going to be a fixed route? Is it going to be a hybrid? So these are some of the questions that are being discussed as part of the study. That's why I said this is different, because before coming to council, the study will be available. The council will take a look at it. What are the pros? What are the cons? How do you control this? How do you deal with employees? And Charles is right. The county transit system essentially is contracted out to First Transit. So they don't have like transit employees as we do in terms of our own maintenance personnel and our drivers. So all these will be answered as we move forward, just to share that with you.
Thank you. Rhonda?
Yeah, just one other thing, based on what Dr. Duwa just said about bus drivers, and this is something that we take particular concern with the city. When it comes to equity, look who our bus drivers are. These are men and women who mainly are people of color. And we have to look at jobs. And so who are we putting out of a job possibly? Would they get the same courtesy as far as job opportunities with the county? And we're looking at this from an equity lens. My last stint with the school system was in the Office of Equity. So I'm really honing in on how many jobs would be lost. And I think that is a concern, a big concern to the city, because we try to be very diligent in what our workforce looks like, and it should reflect our city residents as well. So thank you.
Now, those are very important considerations, and I think many of us have been thinking of this as where economies are provided, they would be in management and overhead. With respect to operational personnel, I doubt that there would be much of an impact. But that's just an uneducated guess at what the result is going to be. And there are many ways we could support this. We could plunge into this right now. We could also elect to sit back on this issue for a while and let this city-county work, which is in progress, grind forward and then comment on its result. Will there be a discrete report that is issued, Kwaku, from this effort that's underway?
Yeah, there will be a full report that will outline various aspects of regionalization. Is it going to be a semi-independent authority, like say SEPTA, or is going to be run under a different name or structure, or what happens to the federal assets at ADOT and so on and so forth. So there will be a full report out there for everybody.
When, is there a date? Is there a target date? I asked it, Kwaku, is there a target date for release of the report?
I don't have the date. That would much depend on when the study will be done. As I said earlier, I will check the timeline and get back to you in terms of the expected date of completion and then the availability of the report.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Next item, as possible new initiatives that I wanted to highlight was safe bicycle paths as obligatory.
I think Carol has a question, Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry, I was not looking. Pardon?
It's just a quick one. I'm wondering if we can be active in involving the public. I'm really underlining Alderman Pindell Charles's point that the more, and I say the sooner, we involve the public, the riders in what is being considered the better. And that could be a role that the Transportation Board would play as, you know, not just a voice for, but a group that listens to the voice of the public.
Thank you.
Ms. Carol, I think we've heard from one rider tonight, so we've already started with Mr. Brooks.
Okay. Another possible thing I wanted to just tickle your brains with is safe bicycle paths as obligatory infrastructure. In some places, in some European countries, noticeably the Netherlands, there are legal requirements that when new roads or major improvements to existing roads are made, that the construction project is obliged to include as a part of that construction the provision for safe bicycle paths, segregated if it can be done, and only after defending why it cannot be done, other provisions such as shared lanes and so forth. There's at least one state in the United States, and I sent you around a report, I think it was in New England, and I've forgotten where. They have enacted a similar law, which obliges the road authority to make a provision in every project that it undertakes for safe bicycle infrastructure to parallel that road. And so that's something that I think I would like to suggest that we consider. I'm not sure that it's entirely appropriate for the city. The city may have a role in this. The state certainly does. And one of the things that we do on the Transportation Board from time to time is to recommend that the city ask our legislature to enact laws. And we've done that on several occasions, and the state has followed through. So for those people who are interested in things having to do with bicycles, Vince Harriman is one such person. I'm suggesting we get together on looking at the law, probably at the state level, perhaps at the city level also, for recommendations that we would make in the future. If anybody has an interest in pursuing modifications of law, local or state, that would oblige the road construction and repair authorities to also provide for safe bicycle paths, please let me know and we will form a committee to do so. More, do any of you have any issues? Oh, Zoe, I see that your hand is up.
Or you can add me to that list.
Excellent. Are there other initiatives that you think we have been neglecting that we should turn our attention to? Well, if they occur to you, let me know.
I think
Zoe?
I think we need to look more at parking, residential parking in the city. Some of the rules that we have that are basically unfair and need to be changed, such as if you are a homeowner but you are not a resident of the city, you cannot buy parking permits for your guests.
Yeah.
So if you have anybody visit you, or you have a child, say you're not here and you have a child who lives somewhere nearby and would like to come and spend some time in Annapolis, either by themselves or with their family, they can't do it because they can't park. I mean, it's certainly they can park in the parking garage, but that's very, very inconvenient. And I mean, these people are paying taxes, the same taxes we're paying, and they're not able to get any parking passes. They can get them for their cars, but they cannot get them for the guests. And now the 2-hour parking's going away, so they don't even have the free 2-hour parking. And I think that's something that has to be seriously changed. I mean, you may not give them the same amount you do for people who live here, but they really need to be able to have the ability to get parking for their guests.
Okay, parking. You're on the parking committee.
Yeah. Tara's got a question.
Yeah, I just don't understand. So they are a real estate owner, but they're not living in the residence, so it's rented out?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I mean, a lot of people
I just can't come up with an example.
Yeah, no, people. A lot of people have second homes here, and they do not rent them. They're just second homes. And
so their plates are not registered in Maryland. Their plates are registered in some tax advantage state. So that's why
or
they
have
can't
a
get.
job, or they have a job that's in another state. So that's why they live in another state and have their cars registered in another state. The
All
point
right.
is
I don't
not
think you're
where
getting a lot of
they're
sympathy, Beth.
registered. The point
Right.
is they own property, they pay taxes, and they're not able to get parking permits for their guests.
All right. It's
That's-
a sticky wicket, though. You can imagine, right? I mean,
Well, it depends how sticky. I mean, if you only allow them a certain number, even if they rented, they still could only get a certain number. I mean, just
Right.
like you and I can only get a certain number. We couldn't rent our houses every day of the month because we couldn't get parking passes, you know? So, I mean, so it's just, there are ways that you can, if you were renting your house, you have to have a rental license. So if you were renting your house, you don't get parking passes, but you don't get the ability to
Right.
park passes.
because it
for
would be a
guests.
double up. It would be a double, right?
Because you have, you know, then the city can find that out because you have a rental license. But if
Okay,
you
I'm
don't,
suggesting that the
Well,
parking
it's
committee take
interesting.
this on. Tara, you and Beth, and anybody else who's interested in residential parking. Boy, that hurts my brain even to think about it. Zoe?
Yeah, thanks, Kurt. I've talked about this project before that I'm working on with the city on assessing critical transportation assets with regard to evacuation and response planning, and looking at traffic signalization and the potential to put in intelligent transportation signals that can help us with reverse flow and congestion planning and evacuation planning. So I would like to, it's not necessarily a new initiative since I've brought it up a couple times, but as far as this group, I think that I would like to continue working on that and maybe elevating it as the study is coming, you know, we'll have some results in the near future as something that we could champion in terms of looking at what the report recommendations would be and encouraging the city to move forward for applying for funding or dedicating funding to implement some of those recommendations.
Would you see our role on this board as basically amplifying the results from that effort with recommendations that the city implement them?
I mean, that's what I'm suggesting. I haven't seen the report recommendations yet, so it
Yeah.
might be something we would want to review and see if it makes sense that we could, you know, support some of the recommendations if they make sense. There are, you know, I anticipate there'll be some recommendations in terms of improved coordination between the city and the state. You know, the city only owns a small subset of the signals that are in the city. I know emergency response is working on, you know, how those relate to evacuation and response planning, and we're doing the same at the Naval Academy. So I think there are a number of things that may come out of the report in terms of recommendations. So it's kind of hard to say what this board would, you know, involvement would be. I just think it'd be something for us to kind of continue to track and advance.
Very good. And you will point us in the right direction. Thank you.
I will.
Carol?
I'd just like to urge the board to, in following up to the discussion about parking and the sense to give it attention, to recognize that as a whole, the board is responsible for residential parking. Parking is a major responsibility of the board, and it is, as I understand it, in my limited legal ability, it is the only legal responsibility we have or that we can operate with. And so as a group, I think it's important for us to recognize both what we heard about at the last meeting from the East Fork Civic Association about their concern regarding residential parking, and what Beth has given one small example of tonight, which I know is only a tiny piece of what is a major matter of residential parking in the city of Annapolis.
It is. Thank you. Rhonda?
Thank you,
And
Mr.
then-
Chair. Ms. Johnson, Zoe, I'm assuming, and I know you have talked to Director Simmons about this issue, about the signaling and the emergency evacuation.
Yeah, yes, Alderwoman Charles, it is a city contract has the study underway right now. And it's being facilitated by out of planning, Jackie Guild and Eric
okay.
Shinsky. And Lisa Greco has been involved in the signalization study that's underway right now.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
So it's actually a city project. It was DOD funded. That's why I'm involved, and we're looking collectively at evacuation routes in the city and at the academy, and then how the signalization play a role in that.
Okay, but Director Simmons is involved in this process?
Yes.
Okay, great. All
But
right, thanks so much. I
he's
figured
moving-
that.
He's
but just
moving
one-
on, right?
Said it again?
There's Director Simmons out of emergency response planning.
Right.
Yes. I've been working mostly with David Mandel.
Oh, great. Yeah, okay, deputy. Okay, fine, great. I figured you had. I just wanted to double check, but knowing you, I know you had.
Well, I was confusing him with Mike Johnson.
Oh, yes, he is moving on.
Okay.
Okay, all right,
Great,
thank you. Mhm.
all right. And we are moving on to our around the table. Unless anyone has new business to propose that has not been discussed yet. Seeing nothing. Going around in order as printed here, Tara,
I'm all set.
Zoe,
Nothing else, no other updates today.
okay, Beth,
Oh, I have nothing else.
I have nothing beyond what I said before. Tom Schock,
Nothing for me.
all right, Charles Brooks. I think,
Unmute.
Charles, we're not hearing you. He may have stepped away. Carol Plewinski indicated that she was intending to resign because of competing obligations. I have not actually seen that she has done that. So I'll try to check on that. I'm kind of hoping she's having second thoughts and will stay with us, but we'll see. David DeQuinzio.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I just have a couple of quick updates of things happening that I learned about in the state level, and a couple of interesting tidbits from other parts of the country about interesting things happening in in the transportation world. I don't know if how many of you noticed that we had some good outcomes with the state legislative session that just concluded, where some bills to study rail service expansions, including improving coordination with the VRE, between VRE that goes down into Virginia and MARC service, so that you could one day board a MARC train as far north as Newark, Delaware, and travel one seat to either Manassas or Fredericksburg. And also about possibly expanding the Brunswick line with a spur to Hagerstown, which is an interesting concept. So these are, of course, in the study phase only. But those bills made it out of their respective committees. They were passed by both houses, vetoed by the governor, and then and enacted by override. So some of the things we have been saying about, now a lot of people had input in this. I'm sure it's not solely due to us, but some of the input that we have provided to our delegates and senator, I think, is starting to resonate a little bit, because apparently they supported the bills as when they came to the floor, and the veto overrides. I'm not 100% sure. I didn't look it up, but the fact remains is that those bills made it into law, and those studies will go forward. And I was particularly delighted to hear, Kurt, that Lisa Rodbean I believe you said that she made a comment about, if we can subsidize affluent drivers, we can subsidize low and moderate income transit riders. I actually had a chance when she was running to she and Senator, or then candidate Elfreth, were doing an event at a private home, and I managed to finagle an invite to it, and I got to bend their ears a little bit. And apparently some of the rhetoric that you've heard from me about what really is and isn't a subsidy, I mentioned that to them, and apparently it stuck somewhat, and they've heard the same thing from other people. So thought that was a good tidbit. And then another interesting item that points to how rhetoric can be used to attack transit issues and things, and something that we, in my role, Kurt, as Secretary of Defense, right?
Yes.
Something we should all be on the lookout for. Tara, you probably know about this, about the Connect US plan that Amtrak has put forward, which looks to build upon the existing network and add branches to trunks and some new trunks here and there. One of the routes that has been, and also to expand support from states. So states that can come forward with matching funds stand a good chance of leveraging funding that's in the infrastructure bill. So one of those routes that has been pushed by advocates but hasn't been able to get very far in recent years is from Duluth, Minnesota to the Twin Cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul. It would go to the newly refurbished Union Station in St. Paul. And as part of the legislative horse trading, a senator from an area that would not be served by this particular train inserted language into a bill to cut the matching funding for it. This is not the end of the saga, but what was interesting was the rhetoric he used. He said, this is like subsidizing buggy whips. And this is an example of the obsolescence argument. And the rhetorical trick that's used here is to conflate how long a technology has existed with whether or not it's a viable technology in 2022, and whether it's applicable and useful and worthy of funding. And so what this particular legislator is trying to do is to paint rail as old and outdated, when I'll give you a historical point, a reference point. The Baltimore and Ohio Railroad was one of the first railroads chartered in the United States. That occurred in 1827, I believe. And Carl Benz developed the internal combustion engine, went on to become the Benz of Daimler-Benz, Mercedes-Benz, and all of that, just after the Civil War. So really about 40 years, 35 years or so elapsed between the first railroad and the first viable engine for a car, right? And yet the car, of course, is depicted as this wonder of modern technology, and passenger rail is equated with buggy whips. So in other words, by that logic, anyone who uses a fork, right? The ancient Sumerians had forks thousands of years ago. So all of you who use forks are Luddites, and you're backward thinking, out of date, technophobe Luddites for using forks. So beyond that's one of several types of rhetorical tricks that I want to that I'll be working to make you all aware of, that you'll hear, and you'll hear more of these tricks as election season advances. You'll hear more of these kinds of things thrown about. Another version of that argument is you'll hear some politicians say, well, we don't subsidize stagecoaches anymore. Well, think about what a stagecoach is. It's a four-wheeled vehicle with an independent source of power that can travel on land. What happened to stagecoaches? Well, we got horses are slow and they poop all over the place and they need to be fed. So we got rid of them. And wooden wheels were unreliable and rough riding, so we got rid of them. And then, as modern materials came available, what did we end up with? We end up with four-wheeled vehicles with independent motive power that can be steered in 2 dimensions on land. And then what else did we do? We changed the name. We don't call them stagecoaches anymore. We call them taxis, and now we call them Ubers and Lyfts. So I would argue we still subsidize stagecoaches. We just don't call them stagecoaches anymore. So keep your ears open for rhetoric like this as silly season approaches.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary of Defense. I still walk around on feet, and they've been around for a couple of 100 million years. All right, Carol?
I haven't done anything except ride a lot more buses recently than I have in the last 2 years, but I am going to pursue a new fascination tomorrow. I am fascinated by the fact that there seems to be a new kid in town, a new player on the block in mobility, and that's the Annapolis Mobility and Resident Resilience Partners. They are the organization that is handling the Hillman Garage build and the city dock development, and they've been tasked with solving the current and immediate transit problem created by Hillman's demolition. But the process they're using to do it is very elaborate. You may have seen in the paper today that the mayor's holding a session to explain all the benefits that are available to the people in town to help soothe the problems that they have from the absence of parking in Hillman. But their range of operation for what this group is handling, and it's the AMRP that is facilitating it, includes the whole city. There's a broadness to it. In other words, part of the program is $2 rides that will be available to anyone in town to go anywhere they want to. I mean, I can't explain that any more than that. That's what I read in the paper today, but that certainly suggests that what this group is bringing to the table or to the play yard is a whole new aspect of Annapolis mobility. And I'll go to that session tomorrow and see what more I can find out about it, besides how to get my own $2 rides.
Thank you. One of the interesting aspects of our conversation with Gavin Buckley was, I think his growing perception that the transportation needs, which are short-term and acute with respect to the Hillman Garage coming down, that he feels an obligation to extend improvements in transportation citywide so that all wards benefit from this. And so I think he really is sensitive to this and is going to try to work with us. With that, I think we come to the end of our agenda.
Kurt, I want to make a comment on Carol's statement about the on-demand transit.
Yes.
In terms of who gets to ride it, there are what is called the transit service zones. Originally, it was supposed to be in the downtown area to help those who were parking at Hillman and therefore will be parking at Park Place and other garages to move back and forth. The scope has been expanded to almost about 2/3 of the city that you get to ride if you live in that zone. So your origin and destination of your trip must be within that zone. And remember, the city was going to do a pilot project of the same service for about 12 months. And because of that, that has been put on hold. You also may want to know that the service hours are totally different. Currently, I believe for the weekdays is from about 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. So it's not something that if you need it in the mornings, you will get it. We have been part of it, but I would like our pilot project to take place so that based upon the result, we will integrate it with an Annapolis transit service. For those residential areas where it does not make sense to have a fixed route, but rather have this general on-demand service. But there is one thing that we also need to be aware of. Because the service area has been expanded to just over 5 square miles of the city, which is 8 square miles, it's likely to have a very negative impact on the remaining taxis drivers in the city. Because now you get to ride for $2, and then if you bring a visitor or another person, the person pays $1. So within the service area of this proposed on-demand service, basically, if you are a taxi driver, it's not likely that you survive there. That is one thing that's I have brought it up, and even then on the potential impact of the Annapolis transit system. Because if you're going to ride for $2, why don't you call VIA to do that? But these potential negative impacts on the transit system, on the taxi industry in the city, to me, they have not been fully examined to know what would be the impact. So whilst if it were part of Annapolis Transit, great. But now we have Annapolis Transit competing with VIA also for this kind of riders, and also with the VIA competing with the taxi industry for people to move around within the service area. Just to put it out there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I think you may have the final word. Thank you all for participating. I'll entertain the motion to adjourn unless people have things burning on their brains they want to get on the table.
Kurt,
Yes.
real quick, just for some detail, what was previously mentioned, the event, the alternative transportation event tomorrow, it's noon. Let me just double check. I pulled up the press release. It's noon at the Eastport Shopping Center, and then it moves to City Dock at 1.
I see.
So
1-hour
I think I can
presentations.
go. I
Okay.
think I can squeeze that in because I want to see the I want to see what this is all about.
That's
I
good.
have a question on that. Was it that you were going to ride the electric mobility features from Eastport to City Dock? Was that with like the scooters and the e-bikes and things? Is that what they were encouraging people to do?
What the press release says is along with partners at VIA and BIRD, the City of Annapolis and AMRP, which is the Mobility and Resiliency Partners, will host a 2-part event on May 17, starting at 12 p.m. at the Eastport Shopping Center, followed by a second stop, 1 p.m. at City Dock. Public is invited to these free events to check out the various modes of transportation. In addition, transit partners will be offering free demos and giveaways, or free ride demos and giveaways.
Okay. That's our homework assignment. Thank you.
So yeah, I'll go.
I'll go.
Maybe we'll see you on a scooter flying over the Spa Creek Bridge.
I will arrive by bicycle. Motion to adjourn? Anyone?
Motion.
All right, second.
Seconded.
And all in favor?